Hello again, everyone, and welcome to this Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather on this 29th day of April, 2018. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. On the graphic, warning advisory graphic here, we've got a lot of yellow areas. This here along the Alaska Range, that's wind advisory for south winds through the passes. Looks like all of the Alaska Range here, gusting anywhere from 50 to 60 miles an hour through tonight and into tomorrow. Up there, wind advisory for the upper Yukon Valley areas from roughly the White Mountains on up to the southern slopes of the Brooks Range here, and that's for winds gusting 40 to 50 miles an hour there. Also wind advisories here for the Kobuk Valley on down in the greater Galena area and the mid and lower Yukon River Delta. That's for wind advisories there for, again, those gusts over 40 miles an hour, 40 to 50 or so. And coastal flood advisories are out for the Yukon Delta coast for heavy surf and higher than normal tides, and also for the southern coast here of the Seward Peninsula, as well as eastern Norton Sound. And that's out until May 1st for the continued high seas and high surfs that could result in possibly some minor beach erosion. And moving on to satellite imagery, pretty good low center here, about 975 millibars tracking northeast to just southwest of St. Lawrence Island there, and strong southwest flow here across the Bering Sea driving the front eastward, really breaking up right through this portion here, separating it out or shearing it apart from this part that's hanging back more to the southwest, but this driving right on in. Areas of rain with that as it came in across much of interior Alaska today, but you can see breaking out pretty good there from Bristol Bay and working into the Iliamna area in southern Kuskokwim Valley. Looks like a partial clearing of rainfall amounts of about, well, over half an inch at Nikolai, northern end of the Kuskokwim Valley there today, and otherwise about 1 to 3/10 of an inch over the southwest interior. Snow and rain and snow, or snow changing to rain this afternoon up here in the northwest, and a lot less in the way of precipitation off to the eastern areas here and Copper River Basin. Rain along the North Gulf Coast today, starting to slip on into the northern panhandle later in the afternoon on Sunday. But you can see on down to the south, pretty nice day, pretty nice Sunday afternoon, all the way down toward Dixon Entrance. And pushing this through again, you can see this mass of moisture gradually heading eastward toward the southeast coast. And so definitely you'll see an increase in the clouds there. But back to the west, strong west-southwest winds kicking up there. St. Paul, they had gusts to, I believe, 54 miles an hour today with this system. While Cape Newingham, Cape Romanzoff, both seeing 45 to 50 mile per hour wind gusts, a couple of the stronger locations there. Bethel almost had gusts to about 40 miles an hour, so very windy conditions with this across the southwest here with the rain and changing to showers, and again some clearing going on with the front pushing eastward. Really hit and miss on the precipitation, quite a range there. Again, 4/10 of an inch at Talkeetna, not nearly that much, say at Palmer or Anchorage, where southeast winds gusting up to 50 miles an hour on the upper hillside of Anchorage today, specifically Glen Alps, made for downsloping conditions, which kept the precipitation at a minimum there on the lee side of the Chugach Mountains. Otherwise, some light rain advancing eastward along the North Gulf Coast, with some a few showers getting into the northern panhandle in the later in the afternoon today. Otherwise, scattered snow showers on the central western Arctic coast there. Get a little more widespread down there as you get in toward the frontal boundary. And again, precipitation falling across all the Seward Peninsula as well as the Yukon Delta, but breaking out to showers, another trough rain and snow showers farther to the west. And for tonight, that front really just kind of rotates up toward the Brooks Range here, and a weak low develops on the southern portion of the front and tracks to about this location and begins to stall a little bit there. This is a former trough, very narrow, washed out band that could produce some scattered light showers or sprinkles right along the coast here of the Panhandle later tonight. Bare chance of rain up to the north there, and then scattered rain and snow showers here, pretty isolated actually over the eastern interior north of the Alaska Range, become more numerous as you head west and a lot more numerous out here toward the west coast. It'll stay quite windy tonight. Again, the wind advisory is out for these areas there. See the tight gradient, as well as the high surf advisories as well. Quite a southwest fetch rolling right up into the coast, Yukon Delta, Norton Sound, southern coast of the Seward Peninsula areas. And some showers poised to move in late tonight, early tomorrow across the Pribilof Islands, with rain and snow showers possible for the Pribilofs, and isolated showers maybe reaching the Fox Islands, but a break for Adak and Atka. Warm front rains spread into the far western Aleutians throughout the day tomorrow. And a weak wave down here kind of lifts northward and redevelops or reconstitutes its frontal boundary right about through here, but it's not very strong at all. It's pretty weak, actually, not as impressive as it looks, with just kind of a diffuse area of intermittent precipitation along the front itself, but that'll keep a chance of moisture in Kenai Peninsula, Kodiak Island areas. Showers back to the west, again with the trough, a little more widespread precipitation, but winds lighter tomorrow for the southwest interior. And a little gusty there for the Copper River Basin, south winds, a few lines there on the chart. Same thing for Northern Link Canal, small craft advisory type winds there, with showers and clouds for the Panhandle. Chance of snow along all of the Arctic coast there, but the best chance up here over the northwest with that colder air wrapping back in around. And moving on to Tuesday's outlook, that front finally moves through, and a weak low develops, tracks up into the, right around the North Waitok area roughly, here for the day on Tuesday. So looks wetter and cloudier and cooler for the Copper River Basin, as well as the North Gulf Coast. Front dragging across the Panhandle. Looks pretty good for some rain, especially over the northern areas, but a chance of rain will develop even down toward Dixon Entrance. Another couple of troughs. Actually, this right along signifies the upper level troughs, so rain and snow showers along the Alaska Range. Kuskokwim Valley early, breaking out here to some clearing later in the day. Not too bad for the Yukon and Kuskokwim Delta. Could see some afternoon sunshine there. And this low continuing to weaken there over the northwest part of the state. So periods of snow or snow showers pretty numerous up in this area. Definitely the air mass is cold enough to keep the snowfall levels all the way down to sea level. Same thing on the Arctic coast there. And then mixture of rain or snow for the Brooks Range. And again, the break here along the coast, could see some clearing, and then more showers in the Pribilofs. This trough right through here, really wind-wise, not much of a producer at all, but actually not much of a rain or wind producer, but it'll keep flying conditions low, and occasionally damp weather will move into the eastern Aleutians. And another weak system, comparatively weak, actually compared to any time of year, both of these are weak, but some warm front type weather will slip on into the far western Aleutians. That means IFR, clouds, drizzle, fog, light rain, that sort of a pattern. But up here over the northern Bering Sea and out to the west, really not much at all. Barely any gradient out there, as well as the northern Bering Sea. So winds will be pretty light, and winds will be also barely a breeze there along the southwest interior. Even up to the north, that low center loses its gradient. So it looks like windiest conditions will be here along the North Gulf Coast into northern, the Copper River Basin, in across the northern Panhandle areas. And looking at the forecast lows for tonight, generally with an increase in the cloud cover, that'll keep it fairly mild there, upper 30s to lower 40s for the Panhandle, and mostly in the mid to upper 30s here for south central Alaska, Kodiak Island, 40 or 39, and lower to mid 30s there for the Tanana Valley areas in the upper Yukon, 20s, mid 20s for the Brooks Range, and teens up along the Arctic coast, North Slope, 10 to 20, with the 20 over toward Point Lay, then into the upper 20s, lower 30s there for the northwest areas, down to St. Lawrence Island, a little cooler air there, 25 Savunga, 29 at Nome, lower to mid 30s for the southwest coast and interior areas, mid 30s for the Pribilofs, 30s look pretty common there across all of the Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, and Bristol Bay. And tomorrow's high temperatures, 45 to 50 for the Susitna Valley, Matanuska Valley, maybe the Kenai Peninsula, more mid 40s here for the coastal areas, Prince William Sound, upper 40s for the Kodiak Island area, and mid 40s there for the Alaska Peninsula, the Aleutians, lower 40s, a little cooler out towards Shimia, near 30 there for Gamble, and then lower to mid 30s for the Seward Peninsula areas, barely getting above freezing here in the northeast, as well as the Arctic coast, staying in the upper 20s to lower 30s. As far as the Panhandle goes, 40s to maybe near 50. And then the lows the next morning, about the same thing, not really much change for the next couple of mornings over the Panhandle, upper 30s to lower 40s, and mid 30s south central Alaska. Teens once again for the Arctic coast and North Slope, with 30s out over the Aleutians. And for Tuesday afternoon's highs, not a lot of change here either, coming up with 45 to 52 degree readings, the Sitna Manuska valleys, and a little cooler in the Tanana Valley, lower to mid 40s, with 20s along the Arctic coast, 40s out over the Aleutians, as well as the Panhandle.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving ahead to marine graphics here, we've got a lot of IFR up here in the northern interior areas, on up to the central Arctic coast, back to the west there, and over to roughly Prudhoe Bay, and then IFR down through the Bering Strait, Seward Peninsula there, St. Lawrence Island. Nothing but marginal stuff out over the Bering Sea Aleutians, right up to the coast. IFR here along the central Alaska range back to the west, and Kilbrook Auckland Mountains, IFR, North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound into the northern Panhandle. For the afternoon, a lot of that IFR just disappears, some lingering up here on the south slopes of the west central Brooks Range, but this all goes marginal. VFR breaking out in the North Slope, VFR 40-mile country here. They're right along the river, eastern Yukon Flats and north of the Alaska Range. So much of the Tanana Valley looking really good. And south central Alaska as well, becoming VFR, Cook Inlet and the Kenai Peninsula and Madawaska Valleys. VFR back to the southwest. Marginal VFR here for the southeast coast. And then for Tuesday morning, back into some widespread IFR for the Panhandle there, and some IFR again re-expands a little bit there for the North Gulf Coast, mostly, looks like east of Valdez on over to about Yakutat, and here persisting along the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range as well as southern slopes of the Central Range, and Southside Brooks Range, IFR into the northern Koyukuk, Kobuk Valley areas, IFR Arctic coast. Marginal VFR is still a massive area here over the Bering Sea, right into the interior, down to the Alaska Peninsula Aleutians, sitting there mostly with some IFR either side, but AKwx looks like they'll get clipped by it. And then for Tuesday, this area slips eastward there, coming in toward the Fox Islands and the Pribilofs, but lifting well north of the Aleutians is marginal left behind. IFR here along and south of the Brooks Range. Otherwise, a lot of marginal VFR over interior Alaska, the exception being the Madawaska Valley. Cook Inlet on down to Kodiak Island, and just about all socked in with IFR here over the southeast coast. It'll extend right on up across Stelphin Cove, Yakutat into the Wrangell Mountains. Passes Enitovik tomorrow, occasionally IFR, same forecast for Adigan. As well, Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal VFR with, again, IFR, eastern entrances of both passes, as well as rainy, marginal VFR with the IFR on the western entrance. And then for windy, though, should be a VFR day, as well as Isabel looking pretty good, marginal VFR. Mintasta, kind of marginal at times. And for Tanita, VFR. Portage, look for improvement throughout the day, so that's basically what this stands for. It may only be marginal to start with, and but it should go VFR hopefully in the afternoon. And then for Chilcoot and White, marginal VFR. And the freezing levels, 2,000-foot pocket there up over the North Slope area, Arctic coast. Otherwise, tomorrow morning you can see at the surface here, this above freezing right into the interior, all the way up there to the Yukon. And then 2,000 feet, North Gulf Coast, much warmer air, but that all kind of sliding eastward with 10,000 feet barely reaching the southern Gulf of Alaska, and about 2,000 to 4,000 feet over the Panhandle, and then the colder air out west with the upper level trough out through here pushing 2,000 feet back down toward Unalaska and well south of Adak and Atka. Icing tomorrow, heaviest stuff will be up here over the west and to the northwest there toward the western Brooks Range, back down in toward the Yukon Delta roughly. And then this area kind of breaking up as that comes by. This mass of moisture will clip Kodiak Island with some icing, and then another system pushing more icing in out over the western Aleutians. And here for the southeast coast, above about 4,000 feet, mixed variety icing at times. Jet stream, upper trough there up over the Bering Strait centered. Good southwest flow, 150 knots. right in across Bristol Bay, north of Kodiak Island, taking a turn to the east here, holding pretty good velocities, 130 to 150 knots all through this area, then diving southward, and 9,000 feet, or yeah, 9,000, pretty strong, 35 to 50 knot winds right out of the southwest here across southern Alaska and into the northern Panhandle, 35 to 40 for the Aleutians, southwest diminishing as you get up toward the eastern Arctic coast, 3,000 feet, about the same pattern there. So looking at turbulence, we've got pretty rough conditions here for the western interior, western half of the state down to the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutians. And after the break, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecasts.
The Valdez fly-in started out probably back in the 80s. It became this mecca of short-field takeoff and landing, bush flying, you know, where everybody meets. All the cowboys show up. You know, everybody shows up with their horse, you know.
Okay, welcome everyone. We'll start the safety briefing for the SOL competition. If you have not done it somewhere else, do not do it here first. This is not the time to try the new technique.
This competition prepares pilots for landing off airport. Whenever you're looking for a place to land, you have to be absolutely certain about that spot. You have to be able to touch down at that spot or a little bit later and never before it. Being able to get down exactly where you want and stop as quickly as you can, one is really fun in competition, but two is excellent training for flying supercars.
There's a lot to it that separates some of these guys from just your normal flying around the United States types of pilot. I guess that's why they come and seek me out a little bit. I've been flight instructing for about 20 years now. Like any kid, whatever his dad does, you probably don't want to do it, you know, but it's the only thing I ever knew. When you're hanging around a bunch of pilots, we have a lot of pride, you know, we talk about, well, I've been flying this airplane for the last 5,000 hours, you know, and I've been in this airplane for 2,000 hours, and, you know, I learned to fly when I was 16.
I've been flying since I was about 2 weeks old.
I've been flying since the headset would fit over my little baby head.
I started flying with my father when I was 8 years old.
So I asked my dad one day, I'm like, hey, when was the first time I was in an airplane? And my dad looks at me and he says, son, you were conceived in an airplane.
This will be my 6th year at the Valdez fly-in, and I've won first place in 4 of the 5 years. We have the T3 tail wheel suspension. You can find that at supercubsnorth.com. In the front here we have the leading edge slats. They help the air stay attached to the wing and help it fly at a high angle of attack. We have a 240 horsepower motor. It cruises around 85 miles an hour, but it climbs out at, better than anything I've ever flown in. Most of the guys that I compete with at Valdez at the STOL competition are seasoned bush pilots that have been around the block for a long, long time. They've seen way more than I'll ever see in my life. So they all give me a hard time about having won in the past. And I just hope that I don't run out of luck here. Because these guys, they are certainly really good, and I don't doubt that they'll come back and get me one day.
All right, you need to do it within 194 feet. You landed. 55 feet 8 inches. Let's give them a wave.
I've been flying in Valdez at the competition for about the last 10 years, and it's been great fun, but nothing has ever come close to the amount of pride and fun that I had today getting to compete with my daughter in this event.
I've been coming here with my dad since I was probably an infant, and this year he finally convinced me to compete too.
Laura J. Erb. Her first landing distance was 209 feet, so we'll see if she can beat her first landing distance. And yes, that will qualify.
All right, Wes, proud dad. Now,
let's see, her second landing was 162. Your best landing was, if I remember right, 152?
That's close, but I have to check the numbers. I think she might have beat me this year.
Getting in a Super Cub for the first time is like strapping on a set of wings and see everything from a bird's perspective, and then touch down and get out, and suddenly you're 100 miles from where you last were, or maybe even in a place that nobody's ever been before, and it's just an unreal experience. Flying up in Alaska is a lot different than flying in the lower 48 because the weather changes so rapidly, the terrain is much more varied. Having the opportunity to be a pilot in Alaska has really defined who I am as a pilot and who I am as a person.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Sea ice analysis for this Sunday. Still really not much different from yesterday, but still melting back, still a narrow band of a little bit of ice there along the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta coast, continuing to melt up, sea ice free into the Bering Strait now, and these areas continue to expand. These are actually open water areas, or not open, but less than a tenth ice coverage, and that'll continue to thin over the next several days. For the coastal water forecast, pretty light winds tomorrow, and forecast for the south coast of the Panhandle, south or west-southwest at 10, 8-foot seas, and then south to southwest 10 to 15 on the north coast with 7 to 8-foot seas. Lynn Canal still pretty gusty south at 30 knots with 6-foot seas, south 25, Stevens Passage, Clarence Strait lighter, northwest of 15. And then for the day on Tuesday, southerlies at about 10, barely a breeze there for Clarence Strait, southwest 20, south coast 7-foot seas, south 20 on the north coast with 7-foot seas, so lose the small craft advisories. Not the case. Northern Lynn Canal stays windy, south 30 knots, and Stevens Passage, small craft advisories with 25-knot winds. Prince William Sound, light winds tomorrow, southeast 10, seas 2 feet. West-southwest 15 here for the North Gulf Coast, and westerlies at 15 extend across the Barrens right into Kachemak Bay. However, Cook Inlet, small craft advisory, south to southwest winds 25 knots with seas at 7 feet. Outlook for Tuesday, drop it down to 15 here north of the Forelands, but keep small craft advisories southern Cook Inlet into Kachemak Bay. About 20 knots there for the Barren Islands, back up to 25 here for the western North Gulf Coast, and then back down to 20 for the east side. Prince William Sound, same wind speed and sea height, but direction going from southeast to southwest on Tuesday. Kodiak Island, southwest winds 20 knots across the island tomorrow, 5 to 7-foot seas, with that 20-knot southwest wind all the way back to Castle Cape to Sitkinak, down to 15 knots with 8-foot seas. North side of the peninsula, though, southwest 20 with 11-foot seas, southwest 20 for Bristol Bay. And for Tuesday, those come down to 15 knots. Southwest 20, 8-foot seas there for the north coast of the peninsula. West-southwest 15 on up to Sitkinak and Shelikof Strait, southwest 20, as well as the east side of Kodiak Island. Out in the Aleutians, western areas, Kiska on out, coming down to 20 knots with 12-foot seas. Small craft advisories here are 25-knot winds out of the west, right across Adak and Atka with 11 to 13-foot seas. And 20 to 25-knot winds here drop down mostly 20 knots out of the west-southwest for the Fox Islands with 9 to 11-foot seas. And then for the outlook for Tuesday, southwest 20 to maybe 25 knots, strongest winds north of on the north zone there. The marine zone north of Unalaska Island right there. 25-knot winds out of the southwest for Adak and Atka, turn westerly at 25 all the way out to Shimei and Attu. And for the southwest coast tomorrow, stiff breeze out of the southwest, 30 knots, not as strong as today for sure. Then south 20 knots, St. Lawrence Island, but still 30 knots there in Norton Sound. And west 30 knots for the St. Matthew Island area, which is down from the storms you had today. Southwest 25 for the Pribilofs. And for the Tuesday outlook, south 15, Pribilof, southwest 15, northern Bering Sea, west-southwest 15 along the coast, St. Lawrence Island 20 knots, but 25 knots, still pretty breezy for Norton Sound. Beaufort Sea coast tomorrow, pretty uniform. East, 25 knots. turn northeast here and then northwest from Cape Thompson on down to the Bering Strait. And then those westerlies 25 here hold, or become west 25, Wales to Cape Thompson. 15-knot winds there from Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort, and then 20-knot winds here for the much of the Arctic coast, still out of the east. A little lighter, though, over toward Demarcation Point, down to 15. And for tonight, again, weak low develops along that portion of the front, breaking and moving eastward here, with the other part really washing out, but kind of rotating up as a trough into the Brooks Range there. Windy and occasionally wet, especially for the Yukon Delta, Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island, and the Seward Peninsula, and not so much for the Kuskokwim Delta area. It looks dry for Bristol Bay. Showers really scatter out and become isolated as you head eastward here through the central interior, but stays damp along the North Gulf Coast into the northern Panhandle. Maybe a risk of a shower along the coast tonight. And then that warm front we saw on the chart there, that actually slips northward and you get another boundary forming here, but not very strong. Maybe some showers or areas of light rain all the way along that frontal boundary. Stays it's less windy here back to the west, and then that front pushes in the Panhandle on Tuesday.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.
Growing up in the 80s, we used to play hide and go seek, hopscotch. All of a sudden, those streets I used to play in were flooded with violence and drugs. I looked out my window where my neighbor had been shot, and I really didn't see myself making it to 21. I retreated to my living room to find safety. PBS became a window into a broader world. If I ran home, I got to watch Bob Ross. It would just soothe me.